The first rock from the sun is fast-paced messenger Mercury. Ordinarily, he is happiest in the sign of Virgo or Gemini, two signs that Mercury rules. However, now Messenger Mercury is doing something quite unusual because for the next 9 weeks, he's going to be in the sign of Scorpio. He is usually in a sign for only 3 weeks. So this is because he will go retrograde and stay in the sign of Scorpio until December the 9th. In mythology, Mercury is a trickster often, and he is the only god on Olympus who has the ability to go between all realms, from heaven to earth to hell and back again. And in Scorpio, let me tell you, he's going to be doing some magical sleuthing in the investigative, deep, and intense waters of Scorpio, of revelation and transformation. And when you add to that, that the curtain is closing on Act 3 by whistleblower Jupiter, who is still in the truth-telling sign of Sagittarius. In fact, he's in the last 2 months of his 12-month stay in that home of the straight shooter, that archer who always points directly skyward to bring us the overarching, the transcendent truth. So the plot has thickened, and now begins the denouement, the final part of his story, in which the strands of all the plot are drawn together and everything is explained or resolved between now and December 3rd. Hi, I'm Judith Royal. I'm an archetypal astrologer, and this is your astrology weather forecast for October 7th through the 13th, 2019. We're in the full moon phase of the lunar cycle that began with the new moon in Libra on September 28th. And this week we have that full moon in Aries, which brings us the illumination of the first 2 weeks of the lunar cycle. This Sunday, October 13th, that full moon will rise in the fiery sign of Aries, and he will be making sort of a 90-degree square. That's kind of double trouble with inner tension. He'll be making that tense square with Saturn and Pluto, those two guys I keep talking about, who are running towards their meetup in Capricorn in January. So, in other words, the full moon this Sunday will bring us to a rather tense struggle with issues related to the right use or the abuse of power. And remember, that's the overarching theme of this new 500-year cycle. So when we're tempted to take sides and, for example, to villainize a candidate or a political figure or someone in our life who has an opinion different than what we think our opinion is, just remember, it's rotten barrels, not rotten apples. And what we're headed for during this big new 500-year cycle is getting all new barrels. So you can reframe the crises that we see on the world stage, where the archetypes are demonstrating, playing roles to show us what is really in our collective consciousness. And that in order to get new barrels, we do have to watch, and we are part of, the rotten ones just sort of disintegrating and falling apart. A synchronicity around that whole issue came across my path this week when a friend asked me to go with her to see that movie just out called Downton Abbey. And I had not watched the series, I think, that was on the TV for a long time, which had a very remarkable popularity. And so when I went into the movie, it was with somewhat fresh eyes, and I was struck by a synchronicity within the movie when the Lord of this Downton Abbey mentioned his desire to make more money and make it quickly. And he mentioned that he'd been introduced to a fabulous investment with a man named Ponzi. And Ponzi schemes are certainly one of our most notorious rotten barrels, in which you can maintain, or the salesperson can maintain, the illusion of a sustainable investment or business as long as new investors keep putting in new money and the old investors don't demand full repayment of their money. And everyone involved has to continue believing in a non-existent asset that they think they own, but they don't. You see this archetype being played out on the world stage in our political arena, where another lord, well, those of you who've looked at my website and the birth astrology information I wrote about President Trump, who is playing his role as king of the mountain or lord of the dynasty. He's doing that perfectly, so we can all get a good look at what happens to apples, rotten or fresh, when they're put in the rotten barrel of abuse of power. This Monday, October 7th, is the first Monday in October when the Supreme Court returns to work. And this year it will be under a humanitarian Aquarius moon, so that in the midst of a lot of activity Monday, there's a double whammy that has some surprise messages. Our challenge is going to be to keep our eyes on the new horizon and not submit to fear. I always feel it's such a triumph when I can watch the news headlines with interest, but also with neutrality, because taking sides is not doing anyone any good right now. So the Aquarius moon will help us with that, and to take a short step from there to the internal messages that we have recorded in our brains, the beliefs from long lineage that we all have of learned fears. Tuesday is rather fabulous when the moon and sun are in harmony. That's the Aquarius moon coming into a perfect trine with the Libra sun. And Tuesday is also a day of a major shift, because Venus, the goddess of love, is going to move into the sexy sign of Scorpio, where she's going to be traveling side by side with Mercury, remember, who's now also in Scorpio. Venus will be there until November the 25th. Then Wednesday, the moon moves into more empathic waters of Pisces for the Day of Atonement, the new year in the Jewish faith. So how about we all join in believing that all is forgiven, that the mistakes of the past are literally erased, and we begin a new time in life in which we are at one with each other and with all creation. The true meaning of atonement, at one. Thursday is a day for dreamers and for daydreams coming true. Pisces moon is going to meet up with that visionary Neptune, also in Pisces. And it's a lovely day to simply let yourself remember the sweet moments in your life when love was being exchanged between you and another person. Then Friday evening, we pivot towards an Aries moon for a passionate weekend ahead that culminates in that Aries full moon, which will be 2:08 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time Sunday. And this Aries moon in 180-degree opposition with the Libra sun says, first of all, it's all about relationships. This entire lunar cycle is about relationships. And it's the standoff before us that many of us feel in relationships between holding on to our freedoms and at the same time entering into an interdependent, happy relationship with someone else. It carries a big challenge also because there is an exact square, an inner tension with powerful Pluto right at the time of this full moon. So issues of how power is distributed and used in your relationships are primary. And then an even bigger challenge comes, maybe a bigger risk in our relationships from that Venus who's newly in Scorpio, and she can be the archetype of jealousy and revenge of the woman scorned. So heads up about feeling possessive. Just let that go. So this may very likely show up in your sexual relationships, where it can bring secrets to the surface that you thought you'd rather keep hidden. Now, that note's an important one, right? Because we are, first of all, in the time of the Spock mind meld, and we might as well go ahead and act as if he or she can read your mind, because, and that you read each other's minds, because there are no hidden thoughts. Now, people often panic when I tell them that, but listen, it has another part to it. It's good news because the only thoughts that are real are thoughts of love. Our thoughts based on fear are just nightmares. They're smoky illusions that have absolutely no substance. So none of us need to fear having our minds read when all that is written there are thoughts of love. Speaking of which, on the road ahead, that goddess of love in Scorpio, who's side by side with Messenger Mercury in Scorpio, they're going to get tighter and tighter in their bond all the way until the 29th of October, when it will be exact. And that will be right before, it's the eve of Halloween. And Halloween will be the day when that Mercury in Scorpio will start his retrograde phase. And for those of you who like to mark your calendars for this, which I do, Mercury will stay retrograde until November 20th, 2019. And so here we get the opportunity to inwardly go on a very thoughtful journey as Mercury helps us retrace our steps. So although a do-over is not really possible in time and space, it is absolutely possible in our minds when we go back and undo beliefs that are based on fear. And this Mercury with Venus by its side is really going to help us do that, so that we all come together in the quiet voice for peace, that is the voice of spirit, that is the voice in our collective consciousness. When we are quiet enough to hear it and to channel its messages into creatively transforming our inner world and therefore the world around us. I think we all want to win. Triumph is a wonderful antidote to discouragement and depression. And I think we are all willing to work hard for the goals that we have in mind. And I find it is just so much easier when I have spirit as my guide. In other words, that I choose spirit as my guide for today, even though there can look like great opposition to peace, to a peaceful presence in the energy around us. But we always have the choice, right? I live on a street near a fire station, and when that fire engine comes by blaring its sirens, I can have that knee-jerk reaction of fear that is left over from my childhood, or I can choose to think of the absolute love and beauty of men and women who have spent years in training to get in that big red truck and turn on those loud sirens because they're going to rescue somebody who needs help, who is in need. We can celebrate those beautiful, sturdy barrels of first responders, of persons who work in service, of you who are listening to this with me in order to bring more love and light into your life. Together, let's step into the resonance of this Aries full moon that has so much courage, bravery, spiritual warrior about it, who shines a bold light into the darkness. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week. And this is Judith at judithroyal.com if you want to get in touch with me for a reading or for a question. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.